67 Basement is sounding pretty good. So Merrill, if you're out there, that's yours. Cropper. I need to get Steve or some of the other local guys over here to give you guys some cropper. Though that's not quite a Harvard. It would do. It's good to see everyone. Good to be back. Sorry for the more extended hiatus than I had anticipated. I was going to do one last Saturday, but the weather was still acceptable, and we've been trying to get our front porch finished. And I promised my wife, and so Nikki comes before you guys. And then it got really cold. It's been cold here all week. So I've got it so far, and tomorrow I'm gonna finish it up. But I did a lot of work last Saturday. It's a lot of fun getting 4x8 sheets of plywood up to make a new ceiling by yourself. A lot of geometry and physics helping things out on my end. I'm just one guy. I'm not Superman, but I'm kind of clever with those things. So some T-braces and temporary ledges and stuff have helped. Just a second. Speaking of it being cold, right about 10 minutes before the stream started, my nose decided to start getting running. So, yeah, that's the 67. Yeah, Robbie F. This 67 Basement is no longer the pure AB165. It's the AB165 preamp with the AA864 output section. So the full psionic treatment for whatever that's worth, which means that you're not hearing in the background right now. I've got a second one here that has had the exact same work done to it. It's exactly the same, recapped all the changes, and it's got a pretty good hum, and I suspect due to some of the troubleshooting steps I've taken that hum is actually a field emanating from the power transformer. Because if I sat here like this in single coil mode, you can hear this level of hum. But as soon as the other amp's on, it's like anywhere within 10 feet of the amp with the guitar. And it's even there if I'm in the hum canceling position. So this one's sounding good. The reverb, for those familiar with the Basement, is coming from a plate reverb added to the mic. Let's get to everyone's comments and questions and stuff. Let's see. Add to broadcast. Hey, Paul Johnson B8X. My Ampeg Challenge Part 2, I said I replaced the can cap insulation wafer. Did I mean removing the wafer? I think so, if you're talking about using the can screw as a reservoir ground. No. Now, first of all, I don't remember everything that I said in any one particular video because I've got too many up there and I can't keep track of them. But I'm pretty sure that, let me make myself a little less huge. I'm working on it. That I would have been literally just replacing the insulating wafer on that because the old one would have been damaged, and you can get new insulation wafers. And I don't recall even which Ampeg that was, but a lot of Ampegs use can caps in series, which means that the negative of one cap is tied to the positive of the second, which means that it cannot be grounded out. So you'll use an insulation wafer to keep the metal shell of that can cap from contacting the chassis, so that the negative of the can cap can be half B plus voltage, not ground. And I would have used a different can screw to hold a reservoir ground. I almost always have to change the ground scheme in an old Ampeg because they just use the nearest bit of chassis, and that doesn't always work. In that same video, I added 20 microfarad filtering for V1. Did I use the lower value resistor feeding that cap? I don't recall. If I didn't mention in the video, then it's stock. I don't recall. If I added a new filtering stage, I probably would have used a 1 to 10K resistor to add in that cap, but I don't recall. If I did that, I would have mentioned it in that video, but I don't remember. Sorry. The phase inverter should get the same ground points as V1, i.e. reference to the input jet ground. My Ampeg jet has a hum around V1 when pulled. The amp is quiet. Thanks. It's tricky. I don't like referencing to the input jack like many Ampegs do, and many trainers for that matter. But I do like referencing all the, and it gets deep, and I've shown this in some videos, and Brad's got a good video on this right now with his JTM 45 restoration on Brad's Guitar Garage. Not restoration, resuscitation, deeply stupid mistakes corrected video series, where he shows the same thing I do. And in his amp, he's got all the, everything from the screen, the phase inverter, and all the preamp stuff, all tied to the chassis at one point over by the input jacks. And he's got the HT center tap and reservoir ground over by the power transformer. And he's doing it all the way I do it. And you always get good grounds that way. But yeah, Ampegs often have issues with hums. And they also have a weird thing sometimes where they'll do a heater to ground reference to a capacitor. Hey, there he is. And doing a heater to ground reference to a capacitor is technically a floating ground, but it often fails over time. And if you go through my Ampeg videos, you'll see that I've often taken that out and just put in heater balance resistors. Hey, Willie Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate that. 78 Deluxe, never been serviced. 100% stock, hearing reverb on normal channel. He likes the reverb on normal, but I guess it's a symptom of something. Well, it could be a couple of things. It could be that you have a failing filter cap, and so signal is bleeding where it should not be going. I put up a video the other day about channel bleed on 60s and 70s Fenders, and that showed one symptom of a failing filter cap where you don't have decoupling between stages. You might be experiencing a different symptom. I saw one of the replies, I doubt that it is bleed through the board, but I suppose all things are possible. That'd be an extreme example of bleed that I've never encountered to that level. What I have found often is that the speaker, which is an acoustically moving thing, excites the reverb tank and makes the reverb tank, especially if the springs are old and kind of floppy, the reverb tank rings out just with whatever's coming out of the speaker. And if you have the reverb level up in a Fender, as long as that reverb knob is turned up, anything coming out of that reverb tank will be blended in with whatever you're playing. Now, technically, it's being blended in with the dry signal. You don't have any dry signal, but that return path to be mixed in with the normal channel at the input to the phase inverter is still present. So if that tank is acoustically excited, you will hear reverb as long as the reverb knob is turned up. So it could just be that you've got a reverb tank that's a little too lively, and that's also very common. But if you like the sound of it and the amp's otherwise working okay, I wouldn't worry about it too much, other than if it's never been serviced and the amp's is almost as old as I am. Look at me. I could use some swapped out new parts. I have never, ever had an old Fender come in where it did not sound incredibly much better after a full recap. And that's all the electrolytics changed out. And I'm not saying that to get your money. I don't have to be the one who does it. But they are designed to have a lifespan, and they wear out. And you don't even know, sometimes you don't even know that they're tired. I'll have guys bring in amps here, they show me how much they love it, and I'll have them play it next to, say a guy brings in a 65 Deluxe reverb that he absolutely loves. I'll just happen to have a 66 here that's been restored. And I say, well, if you love your stock 65, listen to what it sounded like when it left the factory. And they'll plug into the 66 and they're like, oh, I didn't even know that this had changed. Or yeah, because it's not like it's like everything's great and then everything falls off a cliff. It's a gradual decline. And if you're used to it here, you may think that's fantastic. Fantastic compared to what? We don't have a basis of comparison. Let's see. Which 5UG might be better to hang on to, Sylvania or GE? Both tubes came out of mid-70s silver panel Fenders. I can only hang on to one of the two for my Vibrolux reverb. They're equivalent quality. I don't think you're gonna be able to say definitively without thorough testing of each one which one is better or going to last longer. Your odds are you're going to get good long life out of either one. Those are high quality tubes, some of the last really high quality tubes made. And a 5U4 GB is usually a pretty rugged tube. So I mean, if the question between a GE and a Sovtech, sure, GE. I don't think you're gonna have any issue with the GE or Sylvania, whichever one you like the print on better. But do hold each one up and give it a little shake. If you hear any acoustic rattle out of either, that's the one you want to avoid, just because that could become a problem down the line. But a priori, just by the name, I can't tell you which one's better or worse. Thanks, AFM 380. Appreciate that. And we got questions out of order. Usual Thing says El Yucatero Green Habanero for tacos. And I saw before this chat started that someone asked what favorite hot sauces were. Is Greg? Hey, Greg. Favorite hot sauces? Anyone? And Usual Thing says El Yucateco Green Habanero. I've not tried that. For taco sauces, for tacos and quesadillas and such, most of the places I go to around town have a salsa verde that's really, really hot. And I like that a lot for that kind of thing. For the stuff I do at home for cooking around the house, I tend to use either Louisiana hot sauce, Crystal hot sauce. I've got some Tabasco I'll break out for once in a while. I don't like it as much as Louisiana. And I love peri peri sauce an awful lot. Not the Nando's brand. Nando's has got a weird metallic taste to it. But some of the other peri peri sauces, I don't remember the brand. I found the brand that we got when we were in Lisbon, and I found an importer for it, and I get a bottle of that a couple times a year, but I don't remember what it was. So peri peri and Louisiana and Crystal are for me, and and when I go to the Mexican restaurants around town, they usually have a salsa verde that makes me happy. Hey, Joshua Stevens. Let's see, doobie-doo. Thanks for being here. Warming up with my Strat, working on And I Love Her. That's a great song. That's such a great song. Nice, smooth key change. Hint of the genius to come from Mr. Paul there. Sorry, I trimmed my fingernails in my left hand right before I started the stream because they gotten a little long, and they're clanking on the fingerboard, and I sliced them with the snippers into my callus and had a little flap of callus, and not thinking about being in front of the entire world, I just bit it off because that's what we really do, isn't it? Hey, Victor, aloha. Mahalo for being here. And Greg here. I've noticed some Fender Doghouse filter caps having a half circle bend like a strain relief on a Silverface Twin. Thanks for being with me today. I don't know that I know what you're talking about. A little half circle bend. Oh yeah, I do. A little. I think that was places where they had to fit it around a screw that was going to be coming through the other side. Might be there on some models, and on other models not. So there are some models where the little half circle notch lines up with the screw that's holding the board in place from the other side. On other models, they use the same can cap cover, but they're doghouse cover, but there's no screw there. So just a little thing. As long as the in theory, the point of it is just to keep you safe. As long as any of the four screws are tight to chassis, it's grounded, so you won't get electrocuted if you touch it. If something really went wrong, it would short out and blow a fuse. So, what can I share about identifying the outer foil on non-polarized caps? Does this make a difference? Is it worth the effort? Thanks. It's a very tricky subject. On some amps, it makes a slight difference. On other amps, it makes no difference at all. And it's not every position within a circuit on any amp. Best practice is, if you know the outer foil, put it to the side of lowest impedance. You'll notice that Fender did that on the blue Ajax caps. They did that before that on the silver and red Astrons. CBS, for some reason, with the large blue, they started off as shiny blue blob caps, but they're usually covered in wax and get kind of dirty by the time we see them today. For some reason, CBS often installed those backwards. That little band is not cosmetic, but it doesn't always make a difference if you reverse them in a Fender. It's just best practice too. There's some circuits, some high gain circuits where it can make a slight difference. More important is that, and you'll get more benefit than just that, is if you also have a good amount of space between components. So if you had two capacitors that are just forced up against each other and they're passing signal from two different stages of the circuit, and they're touching each other, it does certainly help if the outer foil is to the side of lowest impedance, which can either be B plus or ground. But it can help a lot more if you just move them 3/4 of an inch apart from each other. So it's not like there's one silver bullet for any of these things, or that an amp is going to be great or a turd because one thing has been changed. As far as determining the outer foil, you can do it with just a spare output jack, some alligator clamps, and an AC cord that's plugged into the wall. What you do is you hook up the jack to the positive and negative to each side of one of those capacitors. You plug a guitar into an amplifier, and you take the AC power cable from that amplifier and you put it perpendicular to that capacitor body. So if the capacitor body is running this way, the AC is running this way, and listen to the noise floor. Then reverse the alligator clamp so what was positive is now negative and vice versa, and then hold the AC cable up to the cap again. Whichever orientation gives you the lowest noise when you do that, when it's in proximity to that AC signal, that side of the cap is connected to the ground. That is the side that's connected to ground is the outer foil. You can also do it with a scope, et cetera, et cetera. But most people don't have a scope. Most guitarists can get a spare Switchcraft jack and some alligator clamps and do it themselves. It's pretty easy. It's just not always as critical as it can be made out to be. And sometimes it doesn't make any difference at all. Sometimes it makes a small difference. If you know, basically it comes down, if you know the outer foil, it's best practice, might as well do it. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. Thanks for joining me from Copenhagen. Very much appreciate that. Greg's got to leave us halfway through because it's too damn cold in Winnipeg. Well, you knew it was cold when you moved there, right? It is definitely a cold, very cold week in Canada and up around Chicago. They're getting evil blasts of Arctic cold. Hey, thanks, Bill Avanda. Thank you very much. I need to get Dave back on here at some point. Of course, he's doing every Sunday now with Jason the guys, so he may be too busy for me. It happens. Any tonal or stability benefits of using 2.2K / 5-watt resistors as screen grid resistors on the EL34 power tubes and Marshall gain amps? Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you're going to have more. And the EL84s are going to have an easier life. They're going to have a bit more protection than with a 1K. And they're going to have a little bit more compression, which you may very well like. It's just that EL84s are not, we're not shipping with Mullards and Brimars anymore. The stuff that's made today is not made as well. So the easier life you can give them, the better. And the screen resistance change there doesn't make a huge difference to the sound or feel, but it makes a very substantial improvement to the life of the EL84. There is a change in the feel. Most people like it. So try it, because you can always change your mind and go back to 1Ks. Thanks, Robbie F. John Hoggs, we don't do anything like Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, and Martin Short. We are still funny. And I don't need Dave, and I don't need Brad. All I need is this rocket air blower and this lens and this duck. That's all I need. Let's see, now I'm to the point where the stream started. Let's see. Wainscoting. Yeah. It depends on if you're doing true wainscoting or you're doing faux wainscoting, but it can be tricky. I had Lowe's deliver them. I cannot get 4x8s into my golf. I've got a neighbor who's a friend of mine who watches the stream from time to time. So Chris, if you're seeing this, thanks for watching, and I always appreciate how what a great friend you've been to me and Nikki, and your lovely wife too. Mostly because Bella loves you more than she loves me. But he's got a pickup truck, and from time to time, I borrow Chris's truck. The trouble is, Chris sold his old truck and got a new, shiny new truck, and I don't feel comfortable borrowing his shiny new truck and carrying sheets of construction materials in it. I'm waiting for him to ding it up appropriately so I can then use it. But I don't want to be the one to put the first ding into his shiny new. I think you can all relate to that. Snowy day in Montreal, and Victor's in Hawaii, making the rest of us all feel jealous. All right. Hey, Erwin Lackner, 9718. DC heaters, what voltage after the rectifier is healthy for the tubes? I mean, I measure 7.3 under the load of two 12x7s. My thoughts. I have not looked into what's too high on DC heaters. I always do regulated DC heaters myself, so I've not played around with what the upper limit is. I mean, I know you can do 12, but I think 12 is a series thing rather than a parallel thing. I'm probably misspeaking technically. I would ask Brad. Brad gets more into the weeds on that kind of stuff. I learned when things like that. I learn when I need to learn them. I typically just regulate to 6.3 volts when I do a DC heater. So I don't know whether 7.3 is bad. I do not know. I'm sorry. Wait, did Steve pass away? Wallpaper Music? I didn't know that Steve passed away. Oh, man. So I thought the Steve Cropper earlier in the chat was just because I had a Telecaster. Well, damn it. Let's see. Hey, Matthew DI60Z. Hello from Oxford. Thank you very much. The age-old question, England or Mississippi? We lost Steve. Goddamn. Well, he had a pretty good run, I suppose. What is the most interesting circuit I've ever worked on a service, whether it be how unique it was or something else that made it stand out to you? Thank you, Logan Leaper. There was a 39 Epiphone that I did not that long ago. That was really interesting because it was unlike anything that was. Almost everything else we see from the 50s on is pretty much a standardized thing. And that was a very different way to build an amplifier. And I had to get the voice coil, which is also the field coil, redone in the speaker. I learned a lot on that amp. It had been semi-butchered before. Beyond that, the Hiwatt, finding ways to fix the ground flaws and the bias flaws of the Hiwatt DR103 while maintaining the workmanship that was done by Reeves and all the guys at Hiwatt at the time, Harry Joyce. That was a big challenge as well. That was an interesting one. Oxford, England. Oh man, Matthew, I've got photos up today on the playing now from Vienna. I could change that. I almost did Oxford. I think I'll go back and do Oxford. So let's see. I loved being in Oxford. Let's do that. This one. Select all. Slideshow. Yeah. So you'll recognize that. We had a great time at Oxford. Um, I need to go back. I didn't see all of the Ashmolean. I gotta try that again. I need a do over, and I was very disappointed that the Eagle and Child was closed. I'd wanted to go have a pint where the Inklings did, but we did go to the Lamb and Flag, which was absolutely gorgeous, and Vault and Vines in the in the crypt of that church across the way from the Radcliffe Camera. That was a fantastic breakfast and tea for us. So we had a nice cream tea there on a rainy afternoon. I felt like we were doing everything right. King's College, very nice. Do, do, do. Brad saw Tool, Machine Head, Garbage, Weezer, Gwar, Goldfinger, etc., in 105-degree heat yesterday. Well, whew, yeah, good Lord. I said, good Lord. Yeah, hope you're wearing earplugs for that one. Maybe they're not as loud as they used to be. Hey, Matthew, in a Marshall 2204 1987, is it better to use 100 ohm heater balance resistors or the center tap to ground if the transformer has one? Always better to use the resistors. You get a much better balance with resistors. And if something should fail and a heater to plate or heater short in general with Marshalls is not very uncommon, you don't nuke the power transformer. So there's no benefit to using the center tap of the heater. And Brad is saying, whoever was asking about the 7.3 DC heater, try using a L7806, put a Schottky diode on the ground pin. You should land at bang on 6.3 volts DC. So yeah, I'm going to scroll down, pop that up on screen, just in case that gets missed, because that's why we keep guys like Brad around. Yeah, he says, and he also says 7.3 is not great. Now, which is what I thought, but I didn't want to say for sure because I wasn't sure. And I knew that Brad would know that shit. I know how to look stuff up. I know the things that I know, and I know the things I don't. And when I run into something that I don't know that I need to know, I know how to look it up, and at which point I do know it. So that's how I deal with my imposter syndrome. How do you deal with yours? Any thoughts on the PRS Sonzera 20 or PRS amplifiers more generally? Most of them are pretty bad. The DGT series, the 30 and the 15 are really good. And some of the bigger Marshall things, I think we had a Fillmore, that's pretty damn good. All the import stuff is pretty crappy, and the custom channel C's and H's are bad. I would say, except for the DGTs, their lane is guitars. Plug a PRS amp into a Friedman or Sir or Germino, and life will be good. Plug a plug a Squier into a PRS amp, you won't get anything. They do certain things very, very well. But the DGT amps are really, really good. So Robbie's about to order a 6v6 pair for his D20, hoping they're quieter than the TADs that came with. Per Brad's recommendation, going with JJ, should I pay to have Tube Depot burn in the match set? Yeah, it's not much more, and that you're just going to have much more likely not to have to return them. Now, Tube Depot has got great return policies, et cetera, but pay the $1 for matching and pay the $2 to $4 for the 24-hour burn-in. You won't regret it. The JJs are good. The Electro Harmonics are good. The TADs are not. And Brad and I were both very hopeful when the TAD range came out. We thought this was going to be fantastic. And they were really, really not. So. Oh, if your D20 is a head, you'll be fine with the JJs. In fact, you'll have a little more headroom. If your D20 is a combo, then I'll argue with Brad, and he'd argue right back with me if he had a microphone. I found that the JJ 6v6s the 6v6S goes microphonic too often in a combo. Usually a great choice for a head. The Electro-Harmonix can't handle as high a plate voltage as the JJ, but they don't tend to go microphonic in a combo. Brad says Electro-Harmonix are his go-to 6v6 at the moment too, so he's not actually arguing with me. I'm just arguing with what you said, Brad said. So, there's what you said he said, and there's what he actually says. So there, Robbie F. You take that. Yeah, I would go with the Electro-Harmonix unless the amp has like 500 volts on the plate, in which case, yeah, go to the JJs and keep your fingers crossed. Hey, usual things. I wouldn't do the screen grid mods unless you're ready to unless you've. Here's the thing. I increase the screen grid resistors on the AC30C2X while I'm there because I can. They're already 470 ohm 3 watts. They're already much better than previous models that Vox has put out with 100 ohms. And unless you've done this a while and are used to working on PCBs and have the right temperature and the right solder to work on a PCB, you might do more harm than good. I wouldn't worry about if I had an Vox AC2. I would not be thinking I've got to change those screen grid resistors. I would think down the road, I'm going to make the tone stack change to make it the JMI tone stack. Down the road, I'll go in there and change out that one plate resistor. The only thing that I would do from day one, if someone said, here, well, I'll have this AC30C2, is I go in and find the resistor, the 330K resistor in series before the normal volume pot. I think it's R1 on the AC15. I don't recall what it's called on the AC30, but if you look at the amp from the rear and hear the input jacks, it's the first resistor at the top left, right by that volume pot. I put a jumper wire across it. You don't have to damage the board or anything. Just take a short piece of wire and solder it to one end and the other end, and that bypasses that cap, and that channel will wake the hell up. Boris the Spider. Yeah, the Nando's is weirdly sweet and rough. It was unpleasant. I was so disappointed. We went to Nando's when we were in London, and I've been looking forward to it and kind of saving it. And we went to the V&A, and then we walked down Kensington High Street and thought we were very fancy, and because we're going to the Design Museum, and we stopped at a Nando's on the Kensington High Road, over by where Jimmy Page lives, for Nando's, and it was not very good at all. It was very expensive and not very good. A bad combination. I like vinegary hot sauces. I don't like bad ones. Nando's makes a bad one. Any reason for not using 10 gauge wire where 22 gauge would be standard? Yeah, it's 10 gauge especially is huge and hard to work with, and you're gonna it won't fit in most connectors and would take a ton of heat to solder. There's no reason to use a 10 gauge wire anywhere in a guitar amplifier. Did you mean maybe to type 18 gauge? 10 gauge is like the size of my pinky. I mean, it's not necessary. Our houses aren't even wired with 10 gauge. Hey, J. Michael Thurman. I do not know any amp techs in Oklahoma City. Sorry. I don't know anyone in Oklahoma City. So if you're in Oklahoma City, Get to know me, then I can say that I do, but I don't know anyone. Sorry. The aside from the filter caps, that's a good amp. And if filter caps haven't failed, it's already a good amp. But I don't know anyone in Oklahoma City. Good news is it's such a simple thing to do. Almost any tech who's worked on PCBs can do it. Let's see. Hey, Martin Reed, glad you're here. Victor got a PRS S2. That's one like Keith has, right? The S2, semi-hollow reclaimed woods. I hope you enjoy it. Hope it makes all the noises that you need. Have an Orange says I used 10 gauge because it was all he had. It works okay. I guess I can leave it as is. I'm not sure. I hope you didn't do much with 10 gauge in there. I wouldn't trust any connections made with 10 gauge because you can't heat it up to solder it. But I mean, it's just a matter of it being physically massive. I'm wondering if it really was 10 gauge, because 10 gauge, I mean, this is an iPhone power cable. That's the thickness of maybe 16 gauge wire. 10 gauge is like that, you know. I'm not sure that I would ever recommend it, but if it's working, you know, it's certainly up to the task. It will not be stressed by any electrons that flow. Let's see. Everyone's talking to each other, which is great. But I'm trying to make sure I haven't missed anything. Shiny trucks are silly. Well, it won't be shiny forever. But, you know, it's not mine. So it's not mine to say that thing should be beat up. Let me beat it up for you. Hey, Jamie Jameson. The Ampeg B15 preamp stages have large cathode and plate resistors value, assuming that's because 6SL7s are dark sounding. No, it's really about how the tube load lines work and the move of the tube. That's a really tricky thing. It has nothing to do with dark sounding. You need to have the data sheet from an old 6SL7, like 2 or 3 really good old data sheets. Look at frankstubes.net or something like that. It's out there. All the good old data sheets from Sylvania and GE and RCA and all the usual suspects, people who made the real deal. And then you gotta go to Merlin's site, which I will put up on here again, and learn how to do load lines. Because the load line, the values for plate and cathode necessary for a 6SL7 are very, very different than what you would need to get a comparable amount of gain and comparable performance/behavior from a 12AX7. But some of that is also just funky old stereo design that made its way into Ampegs of the time. Thank you, Our Life Wyoming. Thank you very much. Just built a 7th amp, a success. Well, tip of the hat right back at you. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Does anyone know where to get hold of a 79 to 82-ish Marshall JMP Super Lead with Canadian safety standards? They have extra fuse bank inside. Not much luck on the web. I don't know specifically, but you don't need to have, you can buy the American one into the Canadian market as an individual, I believe. I don't think you need to buy the Canadian version. The Canadian version is actually kind of silly from a text perspective, and we undo a lot of those things it's you're not a commercial seller or buyer of it. So if you can get the American version, you'd be just fine. American English slash American version. You don't need to pay for the silly extra fusing. But if you want to, try the usual suspects in Toronto and Ontario, Montreal, etc. Some music store is going to have a lead on that for you. Hey, Cedar Bay got a 67 Deluxe River that loses about half its volume after it's been on for 5 to 10 minutes. If I do the Fonzie move and knock on the top, it goes back to full volume, then it comes back. And the idea, probably got a bad solder joint that where the board is expanding as things heat, and the probably wire comes out of the solder when it gets hot, and then when you bang it, it reconnects. It could also be a wire going to the brass strip. I'd have to see it. It's probably a 10-minute fix to any good tech. There's just not a lot that can go catastrophically wrong with the 67 Deluxe Reverb. But what does happen a lot is when the board develops a wave, it stresses all the horizontally mounted resistors, and they'll often pull out at one end. Just pull out of the solder joint. There'll be a little hole there, and the lead, when it's cold, it rests up against it, and it works. And as it heats up, it kind of moves and flexes out of the way. Thanks, Oz Column. I appreciate that. Want to build a dummy load to use when testing with a scope or signal generator? Do I recommend one, or have any tips or suggestions? Well, yeah, I'll show you the basic concept. I designed this to have a total of 2 or 1 massive one. I've just not gotten the stuff to populate the other side of it. But I got this big sheet of L-shaped aluminum and the feet from McMaster-Carr. Got these 2 big, what are they, 150 watt, 16 ohm metal clad resistors that are screwed and thermal pasted to this big hunk of aluminum. And when I plug in here, I can choose whether this is 150 watt 8 ohm or 300 watt 8 ohm or 150 watt 16 ohm. So 16 ohm or 8 ohms for that. And then when I finally get on to populating the rest of this, I can choose this or both. So I could go down to, then I'll have 16, 8, 4, and 2 ohm possibilities. And that will load just about anything. Most of the amps in here, I'm dealing with 8 or 16. And even with just using 116 at 150 watts, for most of the amps around here that come in, 16 ohm, 150 watt load is just fine. Or I can go 8 at 300. It's relatively inexpensive if you have a drill press and you're unafraid to use it. There are better loads today, reactive loads, that cost a lot more, but for a pure dummy load, this is fine. Now, if I was doing PA stuff, that's when we'd get into the thing that gets suspended in the oil tank, and the resistors would be 4 times as big as this. But I'm not doing 3,000 watt PA amplifiers. So, and I'm sure there's something on AliExpress that tells you that it already is one, or eBay or whatever, but that's like the minimum build standard to me. That's homebrew done right. Hey, Sash DC, one of my 4 PV Century bass amp heads, transistor amps, is producing white noise static to my cab. The other 3 do not. Any potential thought is what could cause the phenomenon? Thanks. Well, there are a lot of things that could go wrong. I'm not familiar with the Century bass amp. I could look at the schematic, but I think basically you need to say, look up the resale value of that amp. If it's $300 or less, it may be time to just put it to the side and use it as spare parts for the others. If it's worth more than $400, I think you should find a local tech who works on solid state stuff and have them figure it out. It could be a lot of things. but I can't tell you from here what it is specifically. Sorry. Reverb pedal recommended to put in front of a Bassman 59 reissue. Thank you, man. Well, I happen to be selling one. I'm selling a Strymon Flint if I ever get around to making the reverb listing for it. Though the Flint I think has a little higher of a noise floor than I'd really like, and I'm not sure what the V2 version's like or what else is out on the market. I've not played too many reverb pedals I've liked the sound of. Especially if you're trying to get spring, I found that they don't really work very well. The one that I like the most maybe is the MXR reverb, though it does more of a plate or a lexicon kind of 80s sound, but it also does really cool long reverb things that you can do shimmer and choir effects with. It sounds great. Very versatile if you want to do big reverb stuff. But as far as making it sound like a reverb, a spring reverb, there's not much on the market that does the job. And I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, and the Flint's pretty good, but at the end of the day, I find that the best way to do it is to say, hey, this amp doesn't have reverb, this 67 Bassman. I'm playing a dry amp, and I've got a reverb applied to the mic. And if I wanted that to be more, I just turn it up on the bus. I would not trust the Surfy Bear stuff because their tanks are made for them by Accutronics, and the connections are the same crappy connections you get on the cheap ones. I wish Surfy Bear had better tanks. They have a good sounding unit. It's just not going to last. But other people will have more experience. I had the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame sounds like a pedal. Most of them sound like pedals. I don't mean that in a good way. The Topanga is actually pretty cool, and there's a really ugly one from Electro Harmonics, the Canyon. It's really ugly looking. It has some cool sounds on it, but I think reverb is still not been cracked digitally until you get to a very expensive level. You know, like right now, I'm running a Waves model of an Abbey Road plate in Logic with all the horsepower of this Mac that gives that little reverb thing. You can't get that in pedals yet. So, though it's coming, I'm sure. I have not looked inside the Mesa California Tweed. I probably will never will unless a very good friend were to be unfortunate to buy it, because I would never take in a Mesa amp unless I had to. The Strymon Flint is usable, Martin, and I've used it for decades, and I'm about to sell it because I just don't feel the need for it anymore. But it's probably the best of a bad bunch. I don't mention that because I'm selling it, but if you want to, send me a private message and we can work out a price on the Strymon Flint. It gives a real good, for what it is, digital version of spring and plate and chamber, and 3 really nice sounding tremolos. Just there's a noise floor to it, and most of the other Strymon stuff I don't like. I see it. I'm selling it. I'm telling you that I don't think it's as good as people say, but most people love it. Hey, Mr. Schmerler, thank you very much. Will an EQ pedal in the effects loop of a Friedman BE100 Deluxe allow it to nail Dookie mod tones? No. The Dookie amp is a very different amp to the BE100. The Dookie is a JCM 800 that has been bright capped and had a little more low end added overall. And I say that from having spoken to John Suhr, who built the Dookie amp. Um, but here's the thing. Billy Joe did the Green Day album with the Dookie amp because it was the best sounding Marshall style amp that he had access to. It worked in that room for those tracks. If he'd had a BE 100, a straight BE 100, he probably would have gotten a different sound that also would have worked. In which case, the Dookie sound would be the Friedman BE 100 Dookie. And here's the thing, and I'm friends with John Suhr, I'm friends with Dave Friedman. They all make great stuff. None of those amps that you hear on that record sound like that in the room. That album has been mastered to the nth degree. Everything has been EQ'd. Everything has been compressed. They spent a lot of money getting that album out because the record company thought that was going to be a big pop punk album, and it turned out to be. They thought it was going to be like Nevermind. It turned out to be. A lot of money was put into the icing. So you can have the same cake, it's not going to have the same effect. So don't worry about chasing the Dookie sound. Billy Joe Armstrong doesn't sound like that live. If you want to sound like him, check out his live sounds. Or if you want to sound better, check out The Clash, because that's what he's just taking The Clash and making it mass consumable. That's not an old guy shouting at clouds, even though those fucking clouds had it coming to him. That's a guy who was there for The Clash, though they're, I was young, very young. But now the funny thing about GWAR is that Nikki is pretty good friends with their former lead singer when they had the girl in the band. Was that 5 years ago? And when GWAR would come to town, they go to coffee. And what was nice is that I don't remember the girl's name. No one in the coffee shop, no one would know who she was in real life because she wasn't wearing all the GWAR stuff. And I think she came into it from theater. So yeah, I am 1 degree of separation away from GWAR's former lead singer. I'm not going to get into PRS guitars. People who love them, love them. People who don't like them, don't like them. And I think it has almost nothing to do with the objective quality of the guitar as an object. Keith loves his. I respect Keith a lot. They're not for me. That doesn't mean that they're not for anyone else. Yeah, if you got the head, you can use either. But I think the electroharmonics are the way to go. Unless the D20's got a really high plate voltage, which I do not know. Anyone out there know? Let's see here. What 12-inch speaker would complement a driven Strat in position 2 and 4? I've got a lot of videos up showing different speakers being used with Fenders, with people playing Strats and stuff. And it really depends on what sound you're after. The top 3 are usually the Alessandro SC64, the WGS G12C, and the WGS ET65, all 3 of which sound fantastic, all 3 of which sound very different from each other. So I can't tell you which one you're going to like. That's like picking a flavor of ice cream for someone else. Most people like this kind of chocolate thing, but you may be a strawberry banana swirl kind of guy. I can't know. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. They're wholly subjective. When it comes to speakers, I can tell you the ones that sound bad. I can tell you the ones that fail. I can tell you the ones that are bad choice for your amp because of impedance or whatever. I can't tell you which one you'll like. There's the safety, there's the objective stuff, and then there's just the, hey, it just spoke to me for some reason. Someone out there likes the speaker that drives me mental. So. And I really like the Creamback 65. But the Creamback 65 sounds very, very similar to the ET65, which costs quite a bit less. And sometimes I've found, I think it's the Creamback 65 only has 4 holes, and a lot of Fender amps have 8 screws. So something to be aware of. Hey, Mathra Paratikar. I'm probably butchering that. Sorry. I'm right now recapping a deluxe reverb reissue. Great. I'm scraping the silicone of the board. I want to follow one of my videos. Use 4 caps, replace resistor. Yeah, so you have 3, 20, or 22 nanofarad caps, 147, not nanofarad, microfarad. So 3, 20, or 22 microfarad caps, 147 microfarad cap, the 100 microfarad cap that was on the original, just remove that. And that on the original, that 100 microfarad cap was bypassed with like, I think 100K resistor. You want to jumper that. You can leave the 470K that's in parallel with the 47 microfarad, and you'll be just fine. And I removed the old silicone, but I put in a dab of new silicone beneath each cap. And you can see that from the various videos I've got up on reissues. Yeah, Brad just did one. They're good once you've, like I explained to people, the difference between the 65 reissue Fender, which people poo-poo, oh, it's just PCB, and like a 74 Marshall. The 74 Marshall board is actually worse than the Fender board. But what Marshall did in 74 is they moved all the hot stuff off the board. So the screen grids, the heaters are off the board. Fender kept them on the board. What do you think happens when a board gets too hot? So you move the screen grids. You move the grid stopper if you can. You move the heater stuff off the board. You don't need the stupid heater fuse anyway. And all of a sudden, it's a really good sounding, reliable amp. I've not ever worked on an AC30S series. Sorry, Left Paul. All right, we're going to take our first 7-minute intermission because all this beverage has been catching up to me. So I will see you guys in just a few. And some of you lucky few will get a beautiful ad. Tell us all about it when we get back. See you. Alrighty, we back. I'm gonna plug into this one, and I want to show you guys something funny. Whenever someone comes over here to play, they always worry about unplugging the guitar. They're like, "How to put it in standby first, whatever." I'm like, "Don't. Just plug it in, unplug it." These Neutrik silent plugs are fantastic. And the little sleeve here, until it goes into the jack, it grounds itself out. Now, I'm not sponsored, but if you want to throw me some cash, I'll talk about it all the damn time. The trouble is they last about a year and a half of regular use. The rubber wears off, and then you have a brass thing in there, and sometimes the little sleeve gets stuck. So about 12, 15 bucks, I think. About every year and a half, I change it out. It's worth it for peace of mind, in my opinion. This is the ET65 that the Royer mic is on. So this is 2 and 4 on a Strat. Well, sorry, a Springfield, but it's not a driven amp. But I'm not going to drive the amp right now because it's a 50-watt basement and I've got to protect my hearing. It'll do it, but I'm not going to do it right now. Let's see. Next questions. Oh God, I hope we don't ever have to worry about distressed truck finishes. Though I think Tesla's kind of leading the game with brand new rusty ones. Let's see. While using the effects loop on a Friedman run, if I have reverb in the loop, no power to the pedal, will the amp still play? Do I have to take it out of the loop? It depends on the pedal, whether the pedal's true bypass or not. But most digital pedals have to have power to work. So you need to power the pedal or take it out of the loop. I'm not sure why you wouldn't just keep it in the loop at all the times plugged in to power. Get a little power supply, whatever you need to do. But yeah, most people, you're wanting to leave the reverb pedal in the back of the amp but not always have it powered up. Well, I don't remember if the runt lets you has a switchable loop or if it's just controlled by the jacks. I think it's just controlled by the jacks. You have to unplug it when you're not using it then, sorry. But don't run it off battery, just waste batteries. Just get a little power supply for the damn thing and you can leave it plugged in all the time. Could oxidized tube pins be a cause of noise? Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw that Brad answered that for you. If he hasn't, yeah. I'll just show this because I've got a camera. Brad doesn't have one right now. He'll probably have one later today. Let us know if you're going to do a stream after this, Brad. So here is my little copper stuff that I wipe my iron in. I'll also take a tube. Say this is an old RCA 7025. If I think the pins are looking a little bit dirty, I can get in there with an eraser, a rubber for you guys in England, and clean the pins that way. And I can dip them in isopropyl, or I could dip them in a little bit of deoxit. But what I can also do is I can just go into this copper a few times with a slight twist, and that usually burnishes them up pretty well. Gets any tough to remove stuff off. Sometimes I'll go in there with a tiny little X-Acto. If there's a little bit of stuff built up, knock it off. Too busy for a Sunday stream today, Brad says. Next week. Okay. Well, Brad did like 4 or 5 streams this week during the week when I did none. So it's all fair. He unfairly did one about 2 o'clock in the morning my time. I found about the next morning where he showed finishing the J-Tune 45 from hell. That's been a fun one to sit back and watch. It tells you not only how good Brad is, but how bad a lot of builders are. Litigious, yet inept. So, for more on that, see Brad's hilarious channel. Hey, produced by Info, I noticed you've asked that question like 4 times. Okay, once. Okay, well, you added a question mark, you added 3, so we'll let it go. Everyone try to, the question mark's important. 3, preferable, really makes it stick out. 1 is fine. Sometimes I'll see without any of them, but the multiple questions make me lose my place in the because I'm having to scroll this to see, and if I see the question again, I think, oh, I hit the wrong button. Did I scroll back up? Whatever. So try to do the question marks if you can remember, but just try to just do it once if you don't mind. It makes my life easier. You got an old Super Reverb to your collection, and you've got a Tech in Starkville, Mississippi. Very good. Hope Tony does you good. I don't know Tony, but I'm open to it. 76 champ. If I get a 12-inch 4-ohm 20-watt speaker with cabinet, would I disconnect the 8-inch speaker? Could I use both at the same time? You could use 2 8-ohms at the same time, or you could use an 8-ohm and the built-in 4-ohm at the same time. I wouldn't use 2 4-ohms at the same time. I would, let's see, 76 champ. I would replace the RCA speaker jack with a 1/4-inch switchcraft speaker jack. I mean, it's just a 76 champ. So replace the RCA jack with a 1/4-inch jack. Put a 1/4-inch plug on the end of the existing cable for your 8-inch speaker. I don't think that 8-inch speaker is going to contribute anything you need when you're using a 12 inches at the same time. So get a 12-inch 4-ohm in a cabinet and make sure that cabinet's got a little plug, and just plug into the new 1/4-inch jack on your champ. So you can have the champ with the built-in 8-inch speaker when you want that funky sound, and you've got the full range, full frequency thing when you go through the 12-inch, and it's just a matter of disconnecting one speaker plug and connecting the other one. That's the way I would suggest to do it. Oh, hey, Colin, the Excelsior amps are garbage. Avoid them. There's nothing good about them. It can be made into a pretty good sounding amp. If you look at it and say, oh, it's a 5E3 with mistakes. Let's take out the mistakes. Okay, it leaves us to the 5E3. But the build quality is wretched. And the novelty of having the split preamp and power amp just means you have a lot of unnecessary back and forth and points of failure. It's kitsch. They were selling kitsch. It could have been a good amp for the same price. And yeah, Mike Campbell used one. Who cares? Mike Campbell had enough money, still does, I'm sure, from Boys of Summer that he can buy 10,000 pieces of shit amps and not suffer if they all die at once. Second of all, we have no idea if he had his tech go through it and make it roadworthy. You just can't take that kind of thing seriously. They don't sound very good in stock form. In fact, they sound horrible in stock form with bizarre boost options. Hey, CJ, thanks very much. Well, guten Tag. Thanks for joining us. Could I elaborate on what I call clean feedback in AC30s? Well, it's not just AC30s. It's also there in Marshalls. It's also there in some Fenders, like a Vibroverb is especially prone to it. And it is not actually clean, as a scope would show that the waveform is distorted, but we still perceive it, our ears still perceive it on the clean end. There's a compression that happens to the point where almost anything you play wants to sustain. Almost anything you play generates interesting overtones because the amp's not quite to the point where we perceive it as overdriven, but it's just very alive. And so let's see. I'll see if I can get out of this basement if I turn the basement up a little bit. We may watch my mic pre. All right, I've gone from 3 to 5 on this. Let me watch the mic pre. Just a second. I hope that came through. I never know live because in the room, as I held that note out and just behind hearing the finger on the fret and all that, you could hear an overtone. So there was the fundamental, and then all of a sudden that faded away, but an overtone, an octave up came in. And it's just that you're just right on the edge, and everything you do is alive and giving you some, you feel very connected to the speaker. And it's even more so there with an AC30 or say a 5B3 Fender Deluxe than it is with a Marshall or the Spaceman, because the negative feedback in the output section is trying to keep that from building up. Whereas if you don't have negative feedback, there are no guardrails. And so you play a note and it's just very much alive. But I won't know until I hear this back whether that came through at all or whether you can hear it. What you're listening to is going to matter as well. I don't know how much that'll come through if you're listening on an iPhone or something. But the amp was giving me things. The speakers and the pickups were all interacting. Everything was working. And if you were here, I'd be able to say, that's the thing we're chasing right there. It's still clean if you play clean, but it's just giving you what I call clean feedback. It's really, it's a holistic process. Hopefully that helped. When I watch this back, I'll know whether that came across at all. I know that the mic got it, and I'm seeing the level meters showing that you should be able to hear it, but I don't know how apparent it is because of the way the YouTube compresses things, especially in the live stream. So, I'm curious what makes an amp sound like itself. The way an AC30 sounds different to a twin reverb, even if you cue the same, like human voices being different. Where does it come from? Hey, Sayer Walid. Well, there's a guy in Nashville who says that it doesn't matter. He's done some videos tested showing that it does not matter. I thought his samples were not very accurate, let alone convincing. Same for his Tonewood debunking. But what's the best way to put this? Fender Twin is a very different amp than an AC30. An AC30 is a very similar amp to a JTM45. An AC30 is a very similar amp to a Marshall, Plexi, 1987, 1959. The architecture is very similar in the structure. The AC30 does not have fixed bias, and the AC30 does not have negative feedback. If you were to take a Marshall JTM45 and remove its negative feedback, you would have something that behaved a lot more like an AC30. The twin reverb, if you disconnect the negative feedback, won't sound much at all like an AC30 because other parts of the architecture are different. It's a much cleaner amp. This is really almost too open-ended a question because there's so many variables. And the answer, we'd have to go on a case-by-case basis about 6 different in-depth things and how they all interact. 606s versus 84s versus 34s. Nashville versus, not Nashville, the guy on the screen, Pepe Le Pew just typed Nashville. Sorry, cathode bias versus fixed bias, negative feedback loop versus no negative feedback loop. If negative feedback loop is present, how much negative feedback? If negative feedback is used, is there also a present circuit? And then the speakers that are traditionally pairing each one of these things make a big difference as well. You can get very twin-like sounds out of an AC30. You can't get very AC30 sounds out of a twin, though you can get what people's cartoon concept of an AC30 might be out of a twin. You just make it real bright. People are like, I want AC30. I want to sound like the Byrds. I'm like, okay, well, run a Rickenbacker Direct or use a twin reverb. None of that's an AC30. But people have their perception of what an amp is, or what an amp sounds like. That doesn't always match what the thing really sounds like. Well, if you know the maker of Surfy Bear Usual Things, tell him that his tank sounds really good, but Belton Accutronics is going to really let him down because those quick connects always fail on their tanks, and they're going to fail on the ones he's having to make too. Oh, I've worked on trans tubes, but it's been a really long time. Those are all 1990s kind of things. They're all going to need a recap by this point, at least in the big caps. I don't have any opinion other than they did what they promised to do. They sounded kind of tubey, good sounding solid state amps, really great price performance ratio at the time they came out. I don't know what the resale value is versus what it would take to restore one these days, but it might work out in their favor. Now, people telling each other about reverb pedals. You got a Friedman BE Mini for $100. Good job, Joe. I didn't even know that was a model. Octavia Ande, is it safe to run a 50-watt amp through a 50-watt cabinet with 2 greenbacks if you use an attenuator at negative 4 dB or higher? Ooh, it's safe as long as nothing ever goes wrong. As long as you never forget to use the attenuator, as long as you never hit the wrong switch on the attenuator. The trouble is in this world, at least as I've experienced it, things always go wrong. And I would much rather have a 100-watt speaker, at minimum 100-watt speaker capability to use with a 50-watt amp. But on paper, 4 dB of attenuation, which is quite a bit, with a 50-watt cabinet with 2 greenbacks, you might push it here and there, but it should be safe. It should be. But I don't know. It depends on how much you could afford to have a damaged amp / dead speakers if something were to go wrong. Let's see. Danielle, that's right. Usual Things, yeah. They knew each other from grad school in Colorado, or maybe it was, maybe it was all the way back to, that school she went to in Illinois, whose name escapes me. Don't tell her I forgot. She's always wanted me to go up there. Let's see. Logan Leeper is in the process of designing a couple of amps. From a text perspective, I have a preference between eyelet boards or turrets when it comes to easier serviceability and maintenance. Eyelets are much easier to change things on. But the trouble with an eyelet board these days is that you're not typically doing an eyelet on fiberboard with another piece of fiberboard right beneath it. So you're usually putting eyelets on, Garolite, some kind of fiberglass board, which is mounted that high above a metal chassis on standoffs, the way you would with turrets. So when you're working on eyelets, you can have drips and not know it. And those drips could form stalactites, stalagmites that could give you shorts. Basically, the issue is with an old fender, if you have your eyelet board and there's a board beneath it, then there's only so much that solder can pool. Solder wants to stay in that eyelet. If you have nothing beneath it, what's keeping the solder in the eyelet? Whereas with the turret, it's a much smaller hole. It's mostly filled by the leads, so the solder just has to do a little bitty fillet around it. It's easier to get great results in that situation with turrets, but eyelets are still easier to change things out on. That said, and again, see Brad's 2 videos ago, if you don't put an inch of wire down in the turret, you can work on a turret pretty easily. I prefer the look of turrets, but if I were designing an amp to make more than one of, I would try to go to PCB, because you can certainly make a lot more amps more effectively, more consistently with PCB versus eyelet or turret. Hey, thank you, Daniel D. Appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Anything for the cause, man. What are my thoughts on expensive guitar cables worth the hype or snake oil? It depends on what your idea of expensive is. I think the monsters are silly. I think the evidences are without any evidence. I use Mogami and Mogami, Mogami and Neutrik. So all my guitar cables are Mogami. What is this? Let's see. Got to find where the number is. 2524. Mogami 2524. I've got a Neutrik silent plug at this end. Oops. And a regular Neutrik plug at this end. This is a 20-footer. I have a 20-footer here that I use so I don't get tied in one spot. And I got a 10-footer that I use from here to, like from the pedal board to the amp or whatever. Because I always like my basis of comparison when working on someone's amp to be a guitar straight into the amp with a 20-foot cable. I think that's pretty representative of what most people use. This Mogami 524 is great. Doesn't have much memory. It's low capacitance without being bright or brittle or having any handling noise. There's no microphonics to the cable. The real low capacitance cables out there, if you did this, you'd hear it. Has soldered connections, no George L nonsense where things come loose and pull, you get mystery noises. So if you go to Guitar Center and try to buy this cable, it's a $60 cable. If you make your own, it's about a $30 cable. So how expensive is it? So I don't believe in using cheap cables. That said, if I needed to replace these cables today and I didn't have time to order this, I could go to any guitar store and buy a Rapco or Horizon guitar cord. It'd be just fine. Wouldn't be as good or as pleasurable to use. It would have memory, it would coil up on itself, but there's no need to spend crazy money. People spend a lot of money on the wrong things. No one ever got rich selling metronomes. Yeah, Leland didn't think you'd like the Neo Creamback, but it turns out he likes it a lot. I was really pleasantly surprised with that speaker. Of the Neos I've tried, that's the only one I could ever see myself using. I found it a little bit bright. but yeah, that can be for the most part be adjusted at the amp. It's just a little bit brighter than the real deal, but it still felt like a good speaker to me. Just a different take. I was very impressed with that one. Do I use any form of solder fumes extraction? Most of the time during the year, I'll have a fan running in here. Other than that, no. If I'm doomed, I'm already doomed. And it won't just be for that. I did have, speaking of doomed, I had a mole that had been getting larger here and here. Had that removed. Oh, it was here. Sorry. The mirror effect got me. Had that removed a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I've not gotten the lab results back yet. That's probably from the 70s. See, kids, in the 70s, we didn't have SPF. Our sun lotion was to amplify the effects of the sun. We would put stuff on with the intention of you get that first burn out of the way, then it was get darker all summer. So I had a spot right here. It was getting bigger, and it is gone. So if I go down, it's going to be from being around in the 1970s, not so much as the solder fumes extraction. Hey, TM Grieg from Canada. Best current production amp and speaker for Green Onion's tone. Man, I imagine, given the similarities in general to the Fender Harvard, get one of the Swart Atomics with a 10-inch speaker, you'd be pretty close. Now you get that recorded on a ribbon mic to like 1-inch Ampex at 15 IPS or 7.5 IPS, you'll be even closer. But hey, Flesh84, thanks very much. Do I think preamp pedals nail the tone they claim to? If I ran the pedal in front of a tube amp, would that make it tube sounding versus digital? I don't think any of them nail it. Now, some of them come closer than others. There's two parts to your question. The first part is I find that the pedal I've tried that's the closest as to replacing a preamp has been the Dream 65 from Universal Audio. But the trouble with that amp is that with that device is that there's no way to say, okay, that's great, but I don't want the sound of the bright cap. The only way to turn off the bright cap is to turn on the boost, but then you keep the boost at its lowest level, which means that you no longer have a boost option. You've lost all the other options in the pedal. You don't have access to tremolo. You don't have access to the, various features. You're just stuck in the boost mode, non-boosted, just to get the sound of a deluxe reverb without a bright cap. I also think they really should have given it a mid-range control. So while yes, it does a very accurate deluxe reverb sound, it does a stock deluxe reverb sound, and most players prefer deluxe reverb without that bright cap. So I'm not sure why Universal Audio did that, because it'd be a very easy option to say, all right, do you want the stock or do you want the non-bright? Which is what most players would prefer. The AC30 one, kind of close, doesn't really nail it to me. Certainly doesn't have that clean feedback thing, but maybe I have to, I've going through some Yamaha powered monitors. Maybe if I turn them up, so I'm pushing like 100 dB, I begin to get some sense of that. That's the thing that none of the digital modelers really do, is give you that, replicate that interaction between pickup and speaker, however you want to label it or articulate it. I don't think any of them are there yet. I think the closest as a system would be the Fractal, but that's a much bigger, more expensive unit, and you still don't have that real interaction. And they're not, the higher gain the sound is, the more accurate or the more pleasing the Fractal stuff is. I've not heard a Fractal really do a clean Fender or a clean Vox as well as the real deal. As to running it into a tube amp, that'd be defeating the purpose. The whole thing is designed to be a preamp. You can run it into a tube power amp, like the effects return of a tube amp and get some pleasing results. But most of those are really designed to be played into either a very neutral power section or really into a full range flat frequency response system, basically a little PA. I think we're not quite there yet, but that they're going to get there in the next 5 to 10 years, probably next 5 to 10 minutes at the rate of technology, but we're not there yet. I think the S1, the AC30 S1 is basically the same circuit as the AC10C without the stupid effects loop implementation, in which case it's using the LND 150s to save tube stages, which can be great. The trouble with the 15 is they then run that big signal, attenuates the hell of that signal down to put it through a 5-volt unipolar solid state circuit. Then they amplify it way back up at the end. Signal noise is all off. It has no the 5-volt unipolar supply cannot reproduce the frequency response and the dynamic range that the amp was trying to produce. And then they do stuff on the output section where the screen grid resistors burn. So hopefully they're not doing the stupid shit with the S1 that they're doing with the 10. Good morning from Wellington, New Zealand. Hey, Lucky Jim. So we got Wellington, probably the southernmost viewer right now. And we had a guy earlier in Copenhagen. Anyone farther north than Copenhagen or farther south than Wellington? I'll get the entire globe here at this rate. Thanks for joining us, Lucky Jim. Hey, TM Grieg, we just got a 60 Fender concert, probably hasn't been serviced in decades. What's a fair price range for complete electrolytic filter cap servicing nowadays? Well, it's tricky because a 60 concert probably also has the yellow Astron caps, so those would all need to be changed out as well. I would, if that were coming to me, I don't know what other techs in your area charge. I would tell someone that probably looking at about, I'd have to sit down because there are a lot of caps in a concert. I tell them to budget, plan on $100 to $120 on parts, and to budget realistically 4 or 5 hours, so $400 labor, and that's generational service. That's going to be all the electrolytics, any filter, any coupling caps that need to be changed out, deep cleaning, new power supply, all the grounds done properly. I mean, so it's a lot, but it's the kind of work that only needs to be done every 25 years or so. So if amps were worked on incrementally, so hey, the power cable was changed out perfectly 5 years ago, and 3 years ago they changed out all the leaking film caps for new film caps, and now we just need to do the electrolytics, and you have a lower bill. But when it doesn't, it sits around unserviced, and that amp is older than I am. It's a 70-year-old amp, pretty much. If it needs $400, $500 worth of work now, it's unsurprising, because when it's done, it's going to be fantastic for the next 20 years before it needs anything else done, except for maybe tubes. And my quote did not include any issues with needing new tubes. It very likely will need at least some new tubes as well. Let's see. Did I miss one from Brad? Not Brad. Proker. I can't deal with that name. Both screen grid resistors were burned. This board got a big black burn. I moved the resistor on the tube socket 3 watt. I want to move the 2 other power wire to the socket. I'm not sure what amp you're talking about. I've got this set to all, but I'm not seeing anything else before that from you, other than earlier when you said hello. So give me some information on that. I don't know what amp burned. see. I Hey Robbie, I've had most of the issue with the TAD 12AX7s I had is that they were microphonic and noisy. If yours aren't, then you got lucky. The JJ ECC 83s is a very good tube in general. My preference of current production 12AX7s from most amps is Electro-Harmonix 7025. Not the 12AX7, those are junk, but the 7025. But the JJ ECC 83s are very good. I have a Friedman IRX. Do you guys think it's enough for big recordings? Hey, Mr. 8279. Yeah, if you like the sound of it, it'll do anything you need it to do. It's a really good device. It's a specialty device for a lot of people. But yeah, the sound's fantastic out of that thing. I don't view that. That's not a digital thing. It's got the IR stuff, but that's a tube-based thing. I think Dave really did something cool with that thing. Hey, Colin, I've never tried a Yamaha G5. Sorry. No experience with it. I imagine it sounds like a 5-watt solid state amp with a 6-inch speaker. Let's see. Man, Brad, I've been watching that whole thing, and I don't think they have a leg to stand on. Have them refute you point by point. If I could testify in an Australian court, I'd be glad to be your expert witness. Though I think you're your own expert in that case, of course. But I can't imagine anyone who's done this would look at that amp as it came into you and not say that it was an unsafe piece of well, Australian so shite. Yeah, yeah. Hey, Bill, I hope to. It's just been a really tricky time with production in general and the cost of everything, and I just have not found someone who can do the thing I need to do without me spending $100,000. So it's just a cosmetic thing. Any tips for unsoldering a component from a PCB that's been wax potted or whatever they sealed it with? Well, yeah, I use a heat gun and I heat up the wax and I wipe it off with a paper towel and I repeat as necessary. And then I remove the old solder because it's usually got wax corrosion, stuff that was carried into it by the wax. Get all that out, clean that area with isopropyl, heat it all up, resolder, and then go on. I go on with my life. I've shown that in a bunch of videos. Look at almost every post 72 Fender on my channel. You'll see me dealing with that. I have not changed the strings on the Eastman or Gibson lately, Josh. Haven't needed to. They're still sounding really good. Shockingly, maybe I got them in the back. Maybe I'll get one of them out after the next intermission in 15 minutes, and we'll see how the strings are doing after their time away. Let's see. Waiting for the next question. Yeah, well, the Adam Jones feedback sound is epic, but I don't think it's quite in the same realm as what I'm calling clean feedback. Though his core sound is pretty damn clean. Who is the guy in Nashville that Lyle was referring to? Oh, I wasn't referring to a guy in Nashville. Oh, it was, yeah. I'm not sure. Is that a circular thing? You typed that, and I saw it, peripheral vision, and said Nashville. And I thought that you were asking something else. I don't remember referring to someone in Nashville before, but I'm sure that I probably did. I don't remember everything that I say. Oh man, Martin, I don't want to go back to tape echo and stuff. I just wish digital delays sounded. I mean, not delays. Digital reverb sounded better. Um, it's really hard to find a spring reverb digital that doesn't just sound like about 37 digital delays jammed together. Let's see, AC15C1. Should I change the bias cap R79 from 120K to 150K to run the EL84 is cooler to last longer? Two prices pretty steep these days. Well, first of all, it'd be 100 from 120 to 150, not 120K to 150K. Those measurements are in ohms, 120, 150. And it depends on what your wall voltage is. Most AC15C series that come in, I find idle between 12 and 14 watts with the stock resistor with 120 volts coming out of the wall. So I don't change it very often. If I, sometimes you'll find an amp that just runs hotter, in which case, yeah, 150 would be a good choice. But the goal is not to have it bias cold like a Blues Junior cathode bias, like 55, 70%. Neither is the goal to have it bias nuclear hot like a matchless 19 watts. You look at the tube wattage and you figure out what the percentage is, and you say, I want this to be between 100% and 120%. So really anywhere between 12 and 14 watts at idle, that's pretty much ideal. And usually the 120 ohm, not 120K, is within that range. But if you want to do 150 ohms, it's safe. How would I wire a stereo jack from a mono connection? I would just use the tip and sleeve only and just leave the ring alone. You don't need to mess with the ring connection if you're using it for mono. Let's see. Can overpowering a cab damage the head as well as the speakers? Well, yes, because if the speakers fail and there's no load, then the head is operating without a load. Usually, in that situation, it was operating at a high volume and suddenly loses the load. That's when you have the potential for damage. That's why those flyback diodes that Brad and I put in amps with EL34s pay for themselves if and when that ever happens. But yeah, you never want to overpower the load, because not only can it kill your speakers, but once the speakers die, so can your amp. It's just asking for trouble in every direction at once. You got to be careful with that low capacitance stuff, because if a cable has really low capacitance, it'll also be prone to microphonics and handling noise. There's a sweet spot. So when I voice an amp, I'm voicing it around one of the guitars you've seen on the channel, all with passive pickups, with a 20-foot Mogami 2524, which has a certain amount of capacitance to it. It doesn't have a lot of capacitance. It's not like one of those stupid curly cords that are hip again. Those are terrible things to have. Anyone who used an old phone in the kitchen in the 80s knows the dangers of coil cable. You don't want a coil cable. So there's a certain amount of capacitance, but that's what I voice an amp around. If everything that sounds good with a Strat or a 335 or a Tele or whatever, with a 20-foot Mogami cable into the amp, that's a good sounding amp. I'm not saying that all low capacitance cables are microphonic or noisy, but as a species, they are prone to it. The lower the capacitance, the more likely it is to be microphonic. Good, and you don't have to be behind. You can click on live on the screen, and it'll catch you up to where we are now. Let's see. Well, that's why I had the doc cut it off, Robbie F. Yeah, it it came off real clean, he said, and then he sent it off to the lab, but I've not heard back. I accidentally went out from the amp speaker out into a pedal that was going into the effects return. It's at the shop now because the amp stopped making noise. What on earth did I do? Well, you might have nuked your pedal as well, but you were operating the amp without a load. I doubt that you damaged the effects return because I don't think signal would have made it out of that pedal to go to the effects return. I think you probably killed an output tube / blew a fuse / burned a screen grid resistor. Hopefully nothing worse. You could have killed a transformer, but usually not. We'll find out when you get it back. I have a 2012 Supersonic Twin that is stuck in standby mode when powered on. I think it may be the auto bias module causing the problem. I've seen posts saying it can't be fixed. True. Hey, John, I'm sorry to hear that. I've not had any experience with that model myself, but I know a lot of techs who've dealt with auto bias modules in that and then the base breakers, and it cannot be fixed because Fender doesn't sell the boards for it anymore. But it can be worked around. We have to take all that bullshit out and put in a standard bias circuit like an old Fender would have. Don't worry about the standby thing. That's not that crucial to the amp. But if it's because if your auto bias module is off, the whole thing could be operating very improperly. Standby could be implemented in a different way. Bias can and should be implemented in a different way. That is a big solution to a problem that never existed. In the process of creating a very clever solution to a invented problem, they invented new problems because the auto bias circuit fails in those things. And they don't have the boards. They don't sell the boards for them. So you got a tech just rips all that out and says, hey, it's supposed to be a twin reverb. See, to make a bias circuit for a twin reverb, if you have a bias secondary on the transformer, you need one resistor, one diode, one capacitor, one 10K pot, and one more resistor. I mean, that's it. So you've got, 6 things? Unlikely to fail. Auto bias circuit, you got 37,000 things, and they do fail. So I'm sorry to hear that, man. How do you get a boogie amp gain without buying a boogie? Well, first of all, there's lots of different eras of the boogie sound with that sound different. So I don't know whether you're talking about like a Mark II or a Mark IV, or you're talking about the Mark V. You're talking about, technically a dual rectifier is a boogie. So I don't know what circuit you're looking at. Mark II era. There's a rumor that Dave Friedman might be making such a thing, but all it is a Fender preamp with a poorly added on gain stage after the tone stack. So you could take almost any Fender with an effects loop and put a overdrive pedal and effects loop and get close to that. But there's so many overdrive pedals and options that would do something similar but better, or just infinitely better. Man, look at the various ODS amps that Fuchs makes. Fuchs, Andy Fuchs' company. He's got some ODS models that cost less than a Mesa that are much better built and sound better, and they've got thick, creamy sounds. and beautiful cleans, and that might really make you very happy. Is also the modeling options for that kind of thing. There's not much in terms of actual Mark II. There's not a lot of dynamic to it. I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between a real one and a model, aside from the model when it goes zzz, when you're on the clean channel, and the master volume would actually work. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. What about analog pedals, Friedman Soldano, Diesel, EVH? Do they come to sound like the actual amp, front of amp, or effects loop for those? Well, the Friedman does. I've not tried the Diesel or Soldano. The EVH will not. The front of amp or effects loop for those, the Friedman, at least the one that I'm most familiar with, is designed to be used either in front of an amp or as the front of an amp in an effects loop. You'd have to play around with it to see which one you prefer the sound of. Either can be fine. I think you probably get the best results using it into an amp with an effects loop. So you just have the pure character of what Dave's designed it to do, as opposed to it sitting on top of whatever other amp you're using. But if you have an amp that does not have an effects loop, you can probably get something very useful out of running the Friedman in front. Worth trying. If you have any questions, call Dave. Get his opinion. He'll tell you whether he thinks it'd be a good fit for you or not. He does not need to sell one so bad that he would ever lie to you about it. He'd say, that sounds like it just wouldn't be for you. Or maybe you need to try this thing that this other guy makes that he knows about, because he builds rigs. He knows his stuff, and he gets the chance to hear a lot of other people's stuff. He's a good guy. Send him an email. Super chat, Flesh, thank you. Flesh84, thank you, sir. Is there a set time to get an amp service, even if you're not playing it much, driving it hard, or should I just wait for there to be a problem? Well, I think, depending on the value of the amp, if you have a very valuable amp, get it checked out every 5 years, just cuss. If you have a less valuable amp, don't get it checked out every 5 years. Get it checked out every 7 to 10 years. But do this regardless, whether it's a cheap amp, an expensive amp, valuable, common as dirt, whatever. Turn it on for an hour once a month. You can play it, or you can just look at it and say, well, those lights look pretty. Whatever you want to do, just let it have power for about at least an hour once a month, and give it a general dusting. Just, some microfiber duster just to get the worst of the dust off, because that stuff does build up and collect. And that'll keep the caps wet, and that'll prevent the caps from drying out and giving you premature aging. It's like when you have a battery in a remote control and you stick the remote control in a drawer and you pull it out and the battery's leaked all over and all the yuck is in there. When the battery dries out, it leaks like that. The same thing happens on a different time scale with different results on a capacitor. You want to keep the capacitor wet, and the way to do that, to keep the electrolyte wet, is to keep it charged fairly regularly. Now, if you can play it, if you can power it on more than once a year, great. Power on more than once a month, great. But try to at least have the thing on for a while. The amp will last a lot longer. We're going to take our next intermission. So I will see you guys in another 7 minutes, and maybe I'll bring one of the acoustics out. We can see how those old strings are doing. All right, we back. Let me find my special pick. I need to get rid of the ones I don't like and make it easier to find the ones I do. Now, I want to tell you how much I love you guys. Nikki made some ginger molasses cookies. And I'm not eating one because it'd be rude of me, A, to talk with my mouth full, B, not to share, right? All right, where's my pick? Here it is. Let's get this in tune before I see how the strings are really holding up. Let's see. Next question while I do that. Yeah, you got an AC15C1 perfect condition for $400. Replace the reverb tank and power tubes, still under $500. Right there. That's what it's all about. When people say, "Why are you so down on amps? Why it's cold. The guitar is cold. Everything's a little bit sharp." People accuse me and Brad and other techs who are honest that were unduly necessary, or they see me playing into a 67 super basement or whatever and think that I'm like some snob. I love that the AC15C and AC30C series are both so good and affordable and reliable, which is one of the reasons I'm so harsh on the AC10 and the AC4, because they're so bad. And a segment of the market that can not afford to make a bad purchase or necessarily to have things repaired when they shouldn't be necessary. So when a product comes out on the market at a really good price and you get, it does what it says on the tin and you get a quality amp, I love that. So I think if only they weren't 30 pounds heavier than they needed to be, they'd be the perfect amp. All right, so these strings have been on here for about 6 months now. And yeah, they're a little bit darker than they used to be, but they're not dead. Am I using the pick Keith gave me? This is I was using it on the electrics earlier, and it sounds good on this, but it's so small. Oh wait, had the damn clarity on. Let me try this again. You can hear what the guitar actually sounds like. Sorry. See if I can do this. I'm cold too. I'm trying to hold it up so you can see it, and I can't do it there, so. And with the little pick that Keith gave me. Those blue chips are nice. The phasing effect was when I had the clarity on, which is an AI thing that isolates the voice so you don't get all the background noise. But it absolutely nukes guitar. So without it, it sounds kind of nice. But if I have the clarity on, Yeah, my voice sounds a little bit better. It takes out all the environmental noise, but then this goes to hell because the program is doing exactly what it's told to do. It says, that is not a human voice. I need to get rid of that. Now, I don't have a stand in here for the acoustics. So let me put it in the other room real quick. I'll be right back. So my take on those D'Addario XSs is that I would gig with that guitar tonight and everyone would think it sounds fantastic and I'd be very happy with it. If I were recording, I would change them out. They have lost a little something on the high end and they're not quite as dynamic and the harmonic is a little more subdued than it was. So still totally useful and usable and no corrosion and none of the strings are dented or playing out of tune with themselves, unlike a traditional phosphor bronze would be at this point, certainly. So I think 6 months for a set, and I'll go a little bit longer because I'm not actually recording an album with them anytime soon, but very, very pleased with those strings. I also like the ones that Kurt Mangan makes. Those are quite good as well, but they are more expensive. Not a lot more expensive, like $3 to $5 per set more. Hey, David Allen Herrick. What is... Okay, you did the ground scheme thing. Good. I'm glad. Hey, yeah, the ground scheme, I don't do all that work for the sake of doing work. I don't make changes for the sake of making changes. I'm lazy by nature. So if you see me changing the ground scheme of an entire Marshall, there's a reason. It's because Marshall never got the grounds right. Never, ever got the grounds right. Now, yeah, people made a lot of good sounding albums with those amps, and people think that the hum and the buzz is just part of it, and you can kind of EQ around it and dial it out, and noise gates were invented for a reason. But you don't have to. If you actually go in there and think of it as an amp designer rather than someone copying a Fender Bassman in the basement of a drum shop in London in 1965, you can do even better. So I'm glad that worked out for you. It's worked out for everyone who's done it. Thanks, Texas True. Well, it depends on what your needs are, but like I just said, I really like the AC30C series and the AC15C series. Beyond that, I think Top Hat makes some fantastic amps that might make you happy in a Vox adjacent category. Dr. Z's got some good ones that he's kind of been inspired by Vox. Let's just call it that. None of them are really the thing. The issue with the Vox AC30 and AC15C series is that if you go to a guitar store and play one, the stock tubes they come with are usually pretty crappy. You change those out, and a set of all new tubes for one is going to be like $120 to $200 depending on the model. Just JJs. The amp will just be so much better. And it's not that JJs are phenomenal. It's that the stock tubes are not that great, and they've been shipped however many thousands of miles before you even get a chance to play them. So I've been outsmarted by the drapes I'm hanging. It is a sad day. I shall regroup and run to the hardware store and conquer this beast. John Hogg, I think you and I are living parallel lives. Mine is a wooden ceiling rather than drapes, but yeah, there's always the how many trips to Home Depot can one make in one day? I think I have set the record, especially on the days where I also have to go to 3 Lowe's. So, oh yeah, I don't remember the guy's name. He said that all amps sound the same, and it is under very specific instances with specific testing of of like 1 kilohertz stuff is, yeah, no, they're not. They don't all sound the same. I wish they did. I could just make one app and say you don't need all those other amps. You just need this one. Have I done the AA864 basement mods on the AA270 or AA371 versions? No, because those are very, very different amps. Those are getting back towards just being a very clean amp, they're much more similar to AB763 in the circuit. It's specifically the AB165, which has such a huge amount of gain while having an inherently noisy output section. So I just looked at it and said, well, the AA864 output section is clean and it's otherwise very similar. What happens if I just keep the AB165 preamp with some other tweaks I'll show in the next video up on these? It's what AB165 would be if Leo played guitar. Let's call it that. Oh, the guy in Nashville, yeah. Young Sir 74 has got a early 67 Bassman. This is a 67 Bassman. That breaks up almost instantly with the volume around 3. Could this possibly be a tube, or do I think it needs further service? Well, it does not need. It's not a tube. The Bassman circuit, the AB165 Bassman circuit, has got a third gain stage that's shared by both channels, and it has the ability to give you a truly insane amount of gain, and that's basically where the train wreck came from. But it is held in check by a 470K local negative feedback resistor, which is running between the plate and the grid of that tube. And if that resistor were to fail or to drift closed, drift open or fail, the larger value of that resistor is, the louder the amp will be. And so as resistors commonly do drift upwards in value or even fail, it's likely that that 470K resistor is the culprit. I can't easily show you the resistor. Actually, yes, I can. Well, just 1 second. Let me call something up. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Let's see. AB165 layout. All right, come on, open up. All right, just a second, I'll share it with you. Make sure all my porn tabs are closed. I keyed. All right. So let me make this larger. And scroll over. So hopefully you can see where my mouse is. Yeah, I think so. All right, so, oops, scrolled over too far. No, I didn't. All right. Right here, there's a 10 nanofarad cap. There's a ceramic disc cap in the AB165. And there's two 220K resistors here, and then the two 100Ks here. This is a 470K resistor. This 470K resistor is between the plate of V2 and the grid of V2. Well, actually between the junction of the mixer, which is that point, before the coupling cap. But anyway, that gives you local negative feedback, that 470K. And if that 470K is not working, for whatever reason, you're going to have a ton of gain. And it sounds like that might be what you're running into. So that's what I would look at first. Okay, as far as the AC15, you really need to know what the current draw is, and then what percentage of the tube. EL84 is a 12-watt tube, so you need to know what the idle current being drawn is and how that correlates to watts. So you can, I would have to know let's see, you got pinned to ground. But 10.87, I would need to know what your plate to cathode is. So anode to cathode voltage, and I would need to know what your cathode to ground voltage is and what the actual resistance of the RK would be, nominally 120 ohms. And then I can help you with those calculations. But if you go to robrobinette.com, ROBINETTE, robrobinette.com, he's got cathode bias calculators that'll tell you that if you plug in the values that you can measure in front of you, and it'll tell you where you're at. Hey, Bobby Boy BG, building a deluxe reverb copy and change the pilot light with a 120 volt. Need a false center tap for the 6.3 volt heaters. Is it safe to wire the 200 ohms directly to pins 2, 7 to one of the 6v6s? Yeah, I do that all the time. I don't ever use the center tap, and if there is one present, I remove it for the heater secondary, and I often will run 100 ohm resistors from pin 2 to pin 8 and from pin 7 to pin 8 on a 6v6, because pin 8 is a ground. That way you have each side done, and sometimes I'll do the real estate in an amp. I'll do 2 to 8 on one 6v6, and 7 to 8 on the other one, or 2 to 8 on the other one. I don't remember what I said first. Yeah, absolutely fine. Do I find the wall voltage is generally too high for vintage blackface amps? Yeah, it usually is, and it depends on how much. I found that the earlier in the 60s the amp is, the higher it is, the more the wall voltage needs to be reduced, and a Variac is one good option for that. Brown box, or even just a regulated computer APC backup power supply where it has a battery in there. Let's see. Right now, we've got 116 volts coming out of the wall here in Memphis. So this is not a great example. And let's see what the heater voltage in the 67 is. .5 volts right here with 116 volts in the wall. So I imagine that would be about 100, probably about 6.6 to 6.7 with 120 plus coming out of the wall. So right on the verge of really needing a Variac. But I've also had other Fenders from like 60, 61 in here with the same conditions. I know that would have been like 6.8 volts. And those are the amps where you really need a Variac. So the 50s and very early 60s, absolutely, you need to reduce it. I'd say the later 60s to 67 stuff, if you have one, great. Tell your tech and have them bias it appropriately, but it'll usually work fine going straight into the wall. I've only had one 64 Princeton reverb come in, and I didn't do any work on it because it was a bad tube, but I looked inside and it didn't look much better than the Deluxe. I think I'm remembering right. Just marketing. Same crappy fake blue caps. I've got one of those caps I saved to crack open in a live stream. Maybe not in a live stream, but a video. Maybe I'll crack one of those open, and I'll crack open an Ajax. Not Ajax, a Sprague, modern Sprague Atom, and show you guys what's inside it sometime. Hey Sash, we're changing both screen filter can caps in a Marshall 2203 style amp from 50 plus 50 to 100 plus 100. Yield a tighter feel utilizing a Hammond 3 Henry 250 milliamp choke, also a bleeder resistor value. Well, yeah, you would get a tighter feel. You'd be going to 50 microfarad instead of 25 microfarad. Is that right? No, wait, sorry. No, that'd be 200. Sorry, be tired. No, it would be halves. Sorry, I didn't know there was going to be math on the test. Yeah, it'll give you a tighter feel. I don't know if there'd be any benefit to it, but if you want to try it, it'll cost you $30, but that's all, and some time. Bleeder resistor value, you can use the 56K that Marshall used. 220K would be better, 100K would be better. The 56K obviously works. They don't tend to fail. I'm not sure why Marshall chose those values, kind of arbitrary. Maybe they just had a whole bunch of them for some other reason at the time. Or maybe they just went to a surplus place and that was the one that could get 10,000 of the cheapest. And it certainly works. Well, Bill Lavonda, I would say just bring the amp and say, hey, this is the behavior I'm concerned about. Don't tell them what anyone else did. And that way you'll get an honest answer. And if he says, well, I found the problem and I found a lot of weird work on everything except the problem, you'll know whether the other guy messed up or not. Just let him use his own expertise. That's the best way to get an honest thing, an honest result. Because if human nature is what it is, and if you bring him the amp, say, I'm really unhappy with what the previous tech did. If the guy's not of the best character, he might yield to the temptation to just find all these things wrong with the amp that the other guy did that he's got to undo, and you won't really know whether he really needs to undo it. So just say, hey, this is the problem I've been experiencing. Can you take a look? Hey, John Ram. What does adding the 2.2 meg resistor from the trim wiper to the bias supply lug and a bias wiggle trim fenders do again? It's just a backup in case that way if the pot fails, because pots do fail, especially when there's voltage across them, the tubes will still have a bias reference. It'll be a really cold bias reference. It won't be anything that's operationally ideal or usable, but it'll keep the tubes from self-immolating or anything bad from happening. I don't know why Fender didn't do that, except that the 2 meg resistors were more expensive back then. But I think it's well worth it. And it changes the taper of the intensity pot the slightest bit. Most people never notice any of the difference that it changes the taper. But you will notice if that pot failed and your tubes died, or your output transformer or power transformer died. So it's very inexpensive insurance. I think 34 cents for a half watt, 2.2 meg. Bacon Manager. I have received a bacon donation from the Bacon Manager. I can retire now. It puts the bacon in the basket. I'm going to clone my 63 Deluxe Reverb. Any thoughts on a switchable bias from fixed to cathode? Yay, Maz Greg. Yes, it's kind of thing that sounds appealing because you're like, hey, what if I could do this? What if I did that? What if I did this? It's really overcomplicating it. Finding a power transformer that'll really do anything worth doing with a pair of 6V6s and cathode bias might be problematic. Your voltages will change all over the place between fixed and cathode bias. The filtering for one, that's ideal for one is not ideal for the other. It's inventing a problem so you can solve it. And you're talking about a 63 Deluxe Reverb. Ain't no problem with that thing. Just clone it. Just build another one just like it, and copy how Leo did the grounds. That's crucial. And you'll be very happy, but don't overcomplicate it. If you want a cathode bias amp, get a cathode bias amp. If you want something that'll give a little more fun, maybe, instead of using a ground lift switch, disconnect the negative feedback. That might be a fun little thing you can do, because there's no downside to that. and it's not complicated, and it's not expensive, and it cannot create any other issues. Thanks, RZ8551. And people wonder why I'm egotistical. I get called all kinds of names. I think I've got a fairly sardonic sense of humor about myself, but I know that it doesn't always come across that way, which is really totally on you. I'm perfect. Ahem. Hey, Steve, thanks very much. You got your honey does done. That is always the goal. Do I have any thoughts on solo and fast caps being used in place of electrolytics? Yeah, they're really great if the real estate allows, the budget allows, and the capacitive needs allow. Like they're used in a lot of cars, which tend to be lower wattage amps, and they're physically very large, but they fit and they're great. It'd be much harder to do like say a high watt DR 203 with them, or even a twin reverb or a Marshall 100 watt, because you would have honking big caps, or even more relatively smaller ones, but they'd be the size of this lens, so that's the issue. The film caps are physically much larger and more expensive than the electrolytics, but they last a much longer time, almost infinitely longer. And some people really like the sound of them. I don't know that I've ever heard the sound dramatically improve with them, though it does have better filtering at higher frequencies. It's arguable how much that contributes to a beneficial part. We kind of like the jank when it comes to guitar amps. We like the stuff that's not technically perfect. We're not putting a $400 needle on rare vinyl to be played through a perfectly balanced turntable for hi-fi. Fidelity is not what it's about. It's about creating something cool. More info. 69 silver-faced deluxe reverb, no sound. Tech changed screen grid resistors and all preamp tubes. Stated it was run without a load. That's really hard to do with a deluxe reverb. Now input 1, channel 2 not working. All right. So you're just saying that does input 2 of channel 2 work, but input 1 does not work? I need to know that, Bill. Usually a deluxe reverb, unless you had a speaker connected and the speaker disconnected from this, if the speaker wire disconnected from the speaker, you always have a load because the output jack grounds out if nothing's plugged into it. I imagine the most common thing that would happen if you ran a deluxe reverb truly without a load, as in there was something plugged into the jack, but nothing was connected. The other than that cable or the speaker that was connected failed as an open or whatever. Then you would lose the screen grid resistors very commonly. Possibly, you would lose a dropping resistor in your power section. But if your channel 1 is working but not channel 2, that's not going to have anything to do with that. But you said input 1, channel 2 not working. Does input 2 of channel 2 work? That's what I need to know. Is your JCM TSL 122 worth getting fixed again? I'm not familiar with the TSL 122. I believe that's JCM 2000, in which case I would normally tell you to get in touch with my buddy Brad at Brad's Guitar Garage here, because he sells replacement PCBs for the DSL and TSL series, if that's one of the ones that you have. I'm not sure whether he's able to ship one to the United States right now, thanks to our wonderful government in action. Okay, that's the combo version of the TSL 100. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. So normally Brad would be the guy to solve all your TSL problems, and that's the only way it's worth getting fixed, is if you can replace that conductive board. Unless you've got revision 22 or later, I think it is, in which case you may have some other problem. But typically those have bias drift issues. But Australia is not shipping things to the United States right now, as far as I know. But Bill Boyer, 1971, This is Brad's Guitar Garage. Get in touch with Brad. See if maybe he can, if you have any friends in Canada or something, he can make it work. There are ways to solve these problems, but seriously, Brad made a replacement board for your amp, which is infinitely better than what Marshall ever sold. They're affordably priced, incredible quality, and any tech who's worth their salt can drop one in like 30 minutes or less if they label everything correctly. Beyond that, don't just keep putting band-aids on the stock board, because the stock board is going to it just wants to catch on fire. And it's going to catch on fire. Let's see, we're getting the last 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to scroll through and get any questions I don't want to miss. Not that there are questions I do want to miss, but yeah, use the standby switch on the custom series, Brett. Great amp. You're gonna love it. But yeah, they have 450-volt rated caps, so you want to use standby just to keep everything happy. The AC15 and 30 C series have solid state rectifiers, so though they emulate the sag of a GZ34. But they are solid state, so instant on as far as the B plus goes. So use the standby. Do I recommend people learn to fix their own amps? Well, it's really tricky. Some people can, some people can't. Most people cannot. Most people have no business. It's like, do you think most people can learn? Do I recommend that people learn to fix their own cars? Well, if you can safely get the thing up on blocks where it cannot fall on you, and if you're really clever and you know how to, and you can, these days you know how to use a diagnostic computer, sure, but most people have no business crawling underneath a 2-ton car on jacks that they got on eBay, and most people have no business dealing with the voltage inside an amp. Well, Josh, both picks are blue chips. My preferred one is this TP48 for acoustic, and the one Keith sent me is a 35. It's like a very rounded teardrop. Now, I've also played one that Zach Childs has that's also a TP35, but it's shaped more like a worn down one of this shape, and I like the pointier bit more. So I'm going to order one, but I'm going to try to keep the one that Keith sent me, because it says 5-watt world, and that makes me feel like I'm in the cool kids club. It's very nice of Keith to send that. That was very kind of him. I love the sound of that old Eastman. Old, I've had it maybe 4 or 5 years now. Let's see. It is in its case right now, Martin, in the other room. I usually have it in here on a stand. I have too many amps set up right here right now to have an acoustic getting knocked around. What do I think of the new Synergy? I don't have any thoughts on the Synergy other than I know some of the people who are behind Synergy, and they do good work, and they're very clever people. So I imagine they're fantastic. Thanks, Josh. It's a E8D, which is the Sitka. Their Sitka version of, they have a Sitka and an Adirondack. That's the Sitka version of HD28. They've got, the new ones are torrefied or whatever, where the tops are roasted. That's pre-torrefication. Still sounds good to me, and it's not the Adirondack. I find Adirondack takes 15 years to relax, so I'm glad it's Sitka. I think it sounds great, even if an Adirondack in time could become more of a Canon. Let's see. What's the most common source of low-end buzz in Tweed style amps? Two things. First of all, a lot of the Tweed amps used a unipolar heater supply, where only one side of the heater were actually tied to wire, the other side was just grounded. That's a big source of buzz and hum. Second thing, a lot of them are cathode biased. Even some of the larger amps before 57 had cathode bias output sections, and a cathode biased amp, you're real prone to it. If the output tubes aren't really well matched. Can still be an issue with fixed bias, but it's even more noticeable typically in cathode biased. Those are the things I run across the most. The other thing is the Tweed amps that have the input resistors, the 68Ks that are normally on later Fenders right at the input jack, that are on the board. They're on the board in between some plate resistors and things, and the board develops DC, and you get a lot of noise there, which it not only makes it go if you move the volume part of your guitar, but there's always a certain amount of buzz and yuck being injected into the signal. Hey, Hoagie Man. Yeah, I tell people to get a Variac or a Brown box, and make sure the Variac is calibrated. I offer to buy them a Variac and calibrate it for them, and they pay me for it. So when they pick up their amp, here's your Variac. I verified when it's at 117, it's 117. When it's at 114, it's 114. Never loosen the screw, you'll be fine. And I recommend that you always leave it at 114, and you need to verify that if throughout the day that it has not moved. And if it moves a little, you're fine. It doesn't matter if it's a 112 or 116, but you don't want to forget and especially like here in the summer when the wall voltage will go up to like 130. That's bad news on like a B18. So. Sir Bella versus Fender Blackface. Thanks from Spain. Hey, Mela, 46. Is that 46? Fender Blackface in really good condition, I think, is what John would recommend. They're fantastic. But there aren't that many Blackface era Fenders that are in really good condition. And given how crazy the used market is, the Sir Bella can be much less expensive. And the Sir Bella is very, very similar in quality and sound. The real, and Fender Blackface, what does that mean? Is that a Vibrolux? Is that a Twin? Is that a Super? Play the Sir Bella if you can. Play various models of Fender. See which one speaks to you. Because they do different things. The guy who loves his Vibrolux reverb may not get along with a Twin reverb at all. The guy who loves his Twin reverb may find a Princeton just a joke. The guy who loves his Princeton or his Deluxe reverb may find a Super reverb uncontrollable. And they're all Fender Blackface amps. So play them. And if you like the Sir, it doesn't mean that you're missing the magic of the Fender. You like the Sir. And if you like the Fender, that's great too. They're both good options. Sorry to give you an answer that is not really an answer, but that's the only honest thing I can tell you. Good deal, young sir, on the Bassman for $550. Hopefully that'll do it for you. But if you only have $550 into the amp, I don't know where you live, but odds are you could have a tech go through it and sort that out for you for less than $100. Well, yeah. Well, I would tell someone who's gigging at a B18 to either carry a Variac or a Brown box, or keep the B18 in the studio and get a goddamn Aguilar 500 watt amp like every other bassist in the world. Go get a 500 watt tone hammer for gigging, and it'll take water voltage just as great, and keep the B18 at home or in the studio. No one's going to hear the difference live anyway. And you can certainly hear yourself on much larger stages with the Aguilar. I think you're absolutely right, by the way. Let's see. Trying to. Oh, happy birthday, early birthday to your wife, Martin. And thanks for joining us and have a wonderful evening. 115 volts right now. It'll go down to 109 and up to 123 during the day in the winter. Depends on whose heaters are running around us. I'm not sure if you need a Variac. Variacs cost a lot less than the brown box, but they are much physically larger and harder to carry around to gigs and such. You might be just fine with an uninterruptible power supply. It's a device sold for computers. There are UPCs for like $90 that take and will regulate you to either 120 volts or 110 volts. You can choose. And what happens is if the wall voltage goes over 120, it charges the battery. If wall voltage drops below 120, it draws from the battery and gives you a steady 120 instead of 110. Depending on what amplifiers you're using and how many at once, if you have one that can power 5 amps or 10 amps, that you're going to be fine for most amplifiers. But if you're running an SVT and two twins at the same time, it won't work. You know what I mean? So, and that costs a lot less than a brown box or a Variac, but only gives you the two option fixes. As far as what brand of Variac, there's some that partsexpress.com stock 5 amps and 10 amp models from like $80 to $120. They're red. They're made in China. They need to be calibrated, and to calibrate it, it's real simple. It's got a knob with a set screw. You turn the knob until the dial says 120 volts, and you measure what's coming out. When they agree that they're 120 volts, you put the knob back on, you turn it so the line matches 120, and you tighten the set screw. Because as they come from the factory, if you turn it to 110, it may be 120, or the correlation between the knob and reality are never there from the factory, but it's easy to do. Hey, Rick, yeah, you can change the greenbacks to blues at a later time if you need to. There you go, like John Hogg says. Yeah, they're not that expensive. They work really well. You just have to be aware of how much current is going through them. Yeah, but if you have a deluxe reverb, a twin reverb, super reverb, you're fine. A twin reverb draws maximum 4 amps from the wall. You get a 5 amp APC, you're fine. Yeah, bless their hearts. Josh, man, we got to hang sometime. The old Hegelian dialectic trick. Yeah. I started to bring up a point earlier, and I was going to reference Schopenhauer, and I thought, why would I say that? That would just alienate everyone. But it's nice to know that. Let's see. I saw some. I've got some stray super chats. I'm gonna catch those before we end the stream. I'm afraid I can't get to everyone's questions. Steve, yeah, you're gonna love the ET65 and Veteran 30 combo. That's a great combo. That's what I've got here that you've been hearing today. I put the mic on the ET65. '6263 Basement is a cool amp. I prefer the AA864 to that, but it's fairly subtle. Andy, I have missed your email. I'll look for that. Sorry. If I had an email that said industries, probably somewhere in my spam, I'll have to check. I've had, hey, Wes, I owe you a text. I got your text about Thanksgiving a day or two later, and I kept thinking I need to call Wes and apologize for not replying. And then a day goes by, and then I'm just so every day that passes made me feel even guiltier. So thanks for that, Wes. Thanks for reaching out, being a friend. See what you did to me? Is the Dookie mod something to be toggled on off? Not really. I don't. It could be, but it's like 4 or 5 substantial changes that have to happen at once, and that would to do it properly. That'd be a lot of relays, and it gets complicated. I here's the thing. People don't want to. Just a second. We still live? You guys still hearing me? This is the second time the Chrome thing just went away. Are we streaming? It says we're streaming. Okay, cool. Yeah, the Chrome just froze. And I have the Chrome open to show the that I have 162 concurrent video viewers and all that stuff, and I can add ads. And then I've got the current chat in a different window, and those both just froze and made me think that the broadcast went away. As I was saying, what people don't want to talk about is when you're talking about the level of the Dookie amp or the Sir 39 that Slash tried to steal and all that stuff. These are not musicians. These are not clients. These are not organizations that need one amp to do 30 different things. They're going to go into the record plant. They're going to take 7 different Marshalls, each of which does a different thing. And they'll just see what combination works for the track when they bring up the combinations of faders. So making the Dookie amp, it would not be feasible to say this amp can be Dookie, or if I push this button, then the same amp changes from Dookie to stock and then to Sir 39. So you have specialized tools. They're not Swiss Army knives. They're, individual blades. I don't know. I lost the analogy there. So it's tricky to do that stuff. Hey, Fabio, thank you very much. Any thoughts on the third power dirty sync? I'm not familiar with the model. I'm going to Anderson's to try one. Do you know someone I can take it to inspect to make sure I'm not going to get a lemon? Thanks much. I don't know who's Anderson's. I know Anderton's. I don't know Anderson's. I would hope. I mean, you can reach out to Third Power. They're good people. I've spoken to them a few times. I don't know what area of the UK you're in. You could try Chris at Rift Amps. He could give you a very thorough inspection. And if you're Anderton's, okay, yeah, Anderton's. I think Chris is closer to Anderton's. My other friend who does that is up in Manchester, pretty far away. You're in Surrey. Yeah, try Chris at Rift Amps. I imagine he'd be within an hour or two of you. Might be worth bringing it to him. Or call Chris at Rift Amps and tell him where in Surrey you are, and if he knows someone to bring, he could recommend you to. He's got to know techs in that neck of the woods much more than I do. The sad thing is we just can't say Anderton said it was good. They should be able to just tell you that. I imagine they've got a good return policy, though. I'm not shit talking Andertons. I don't have any experience with them, pro or con. And I miss the days when Chappers and the Captain were enjoyable. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up there before I burn any more industry bridges. I I liked it. I did like that show back when it was two goofballs in a small room, trying desperately to stand out from the crowd and move some guitars at Anderson's, and it just got big, and then Chapman guitars became a thing, and I'm just not going to discuss that. And it became about the people, and I don't know. It diverged from what I ever found enjoyable about it. But I wish them all well. So greetings if you're watching this, chappers. Um, See you guys very soon. Thanks for all being here. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again soon. I know weekend after this, we're going to be up at Nikki's family's during their early Christmas, and I'm not sure when Christmas is. So next Saturday, I should be able to be here with you guys again. One after that, probably not. And then after that might be, all might be too busy for me. I'm not sure when Christmas actually is. I mean, I know the date, but I don't know. I looked at the calendar. All right, I'll go do that. You guys go do other things. Good luck with the drapes, dude.